Amid the gentle hills of northern Texas, hidden behind towering iron gates and neatly trimmed trees, lay a vast estate known as the Whitmore Canine Ranch. This was no ordinary dog training facility. It was built like a military compound for four-legged soldiers, orderly, spotless, and strictly disciplined. Rows of kennels stretched along the perimeter, each housing dogs that were meticulously cared for, from nutrition to health to behavior training. The entire place operated like a perfectly tuned machine. Yet amid that perfection, there was one flaw, Max. Max was a large German shepherd, striking with his black-gray coat and piercing, wary gaze. He didn't bark like normal dogs, he growled. He didn't play, he attacked. Max lived alone in the most isolated kennel, a place no one at the ranch dared to approach without a serious reason. Over the span of 6 months, 3 trainers had tried to rehabilitate him. 2 ended up in the hospital with dozens of stitches, the third left with a broken arm. Max became a haunting presence, a riddle no one could solve. The owner of the ranch was Mr. Whitmore, a once famous tech billionaire who had since retreated from public life, refusing all media and interviews. People knew him not just for his immense wealth, but also for his strange, distant, and intensely private demeanor. However, with dogs, he was different. There was something in his eyes whenever he looked at them, a tenderness, a hint of regret, and perhaps an old, unhealed sorrow. People often wondered why Whitmore wouldn't give up on Max. With all his resources, he could have easily solved the problem, sent the dog away, or had him put down. But he never did. Until one day, a staff member happened to glimpse a photo on the shelf in his office. A boy around 8 years old, hugging a dog that looked exactly like Max. The caption read, "Me and Duke, 1965. Only then did people start to understand. Max wasn't just a dog. He was the last symbol of a memory, a piece of Mr. Whitmore's soul he couldn't bear to lose. Perhaps Max resembled a long-lost childhood friend. Perhaps he was the descendant of Duke, the loyal companion Whitmore once loved more than anyone else. One chilly winter morning, standing silently by the fence, hands gripping his coat, eyes lost in the direction of Max's kennel, Mr. Whitmore spoke. Not through a secretary, not through an announcement. He declared it himself, in a voice firm and raw. $1 million to anyone who can make Max gentle again, not just obedient, trusting. No one laughed. No one thought it was a joke. Everyone who worked there understood this wasn't about money. It was the last desperate plea of a man who had lost too much: his family, his friends, his past, and perhaps even himself. His eyes didn't carry the look of a man posing a challenge. They carried the ache of someone trying to save the last thing that reminded him he was still human. The offer spread quickly through town and beyond. Dog trainers whispered about it. The media grew curious. But no one stepped forward. Everyone knew Max wasn't just a dangerous dog. He was a wound with a heartbeat, and not everyone has the patience or the love to heal a wound like that. Amid the bustling crowds of the city, where car horns drowned out voices and where no one noticed the small shadows tucked behind lampposts or beneath rusted awnings, there was a girl named Maya. She was only 12 but had already mastered the art of surviving in a world that had forgotten her. No one called her name in the morning. No one waited for her at night. She drifted through people's lives like smoke, light, faint, and unseen. Maya didn't remember her parents clearly. Her memories were just fragments: a half-sung lullaby, a soft jacket, the warm scent of cinnamon in winter. All of it had been washed away by time and poverty. What remained was cold concrete, shadowy corners by the roadside, and long nights without a single word of concern. She survived by doing odd jobs: wiping car windshields at red lights, selling candy on street corners, asking for loose change from hurried strangers. Her voice had grown hoarse, not from shyness, but from disuse. She had learned that the world didn't listen, so she had stopped speaking to it. Then one afternoon, while huddled by a parking lot behind an abandoned gas station, Maya overheard 2 delivery men talking. "You hear, that old billionaire is offering $1 million to anyone who can tame his psycho dog." The other one laughed. You mean that black shepherd? It tore a grown man's arm apart. Nobody dares get near it. Maya heard them but didn't react. She didn't nod, didn't lift her head. She just listened quietly. Yet something stirred inside her. Not because of the $1 million, she couldn't even picture what that amount looked like, but because of the words, "Nobody can get close to that dog." That night, curled beneath the rusted eaves of a boarded-up shop, her thin jacket soaked with rain, fingers numb with cold, Maya wasn't thinking about hunger or pain. She was thinking about Max, the dog abandoned inside its own fury. And a strange thought crept into her heart. Maybe he needs someone like me. The next morning, Maya woke earlier than usual. The city was still draped in mist and distant sirens. She had no map, no phone, just a name she heard in passing, Whitmore K9 Estate, and a vague sense of direction. She tied her frayed shoelaces, slung her old plastic water bottle over her shoulder, and started walking. She didn't know how far it was, but her steps were steadier than they had ever been. All day, Maya asked strangers for directions. Some pointed vaguely, some shrugged, some chuckled and said, "It's far, kid. Just go home." But she didn't turn back. Not once. The paved streets turned into dusty dirt roads. On either side stretched dry fields under the scorching sun. Maya's legs burned, her lips cracked, her head grew dizzy. She nearly stepped on a snake. Twice she thought about giving up. But she didn't stop because this was no longer a journey toward a place. It was a journey to prove she existed. By late afternoon, just as the sun began dipping behind the hills, she finally saw it. The tall iron gates of Whitmore Estate. Two silent security cameras stared at her. Beyond the fence, rolling hills and distant buildings glowed in the orange twilight. Maya pressed her palm to the cold metal and whispered, "I made it." No one answered when she knocked the first time. She waited. Her eyes never strayed from the trees beyond. An hour passed before a guard appeared, neatly dressed, mirrored sunglasses reflecting her dirt-smudged face. "What do you want, kid?" Maya didn't flinch. She didn't beg. Her voice was low but firm. "I want to try to calm Max." The guard scoffed, more mock than amusement, but he didn't open the gate. He turned and walked away. Maya stayed. That night she curled up beside the gate. No blanket, no fire, just her determination to keep her warm. The wind howled, coyotes cried in the distance. She slept there on the ground, alone. The next day she was there again, and the next. Every morning she stood in the same spot, her gaze unwavering. Word started to spread among the estate's staff. A groundskeeper quietly left her half a sandwich. She nodded in gratitude but said nothing. On the fourth day, an older, slower-moving guard observed her for a long while. Then he lifted his radio and spoke. "Sir, there's a kid. Been here 4 days straight. Says she wants to see Max." After a pause, a calm, gravelly voice responded through the static. "I'll come out." And so, the lonely journey of a homeless girl with nothing but a fragile hope that she could reach what others had given up on, had brought her to the moment everything would change. That early morning sky was clear, not a single cloud in sight. The sunlight was still pale, and the dew clung thick on the grass. Maya stood motionless, like a statue in the front yard of Whitmore Estate. Her tattered shoes were soaked from the night's dampness, and her hands gently clutched the hem of her thin jacket. Though her back still ached from nights spent sleeping on hard ground, she stood tall, her gaze calm and steady, directed toward the gate where the dogs were being let out for training. Behind her, the sound of footsteps echoed, steady and firm. Maya didn't turn. She knew it was Mr. Whitmore. He didn't walk like ordinary people. He approached with the presence of someone accustomed to command and control, yet carried a deep silence that had become second nature. The man stopped a few steps away from her, silently observing for a long moment. He wore a dark overcoat, buttoned neatly despite the mild weather, and his silver hair was combed with the precision of someone who had known discipline his whole life. His face bore no emotion, but his eyes, deep and weary, held everything unsaid. "You're the child who waited at the gate," Maya nodded. "Why?" It wasn't a question of impatience, nor of mockery. It was simply an invitation to speak. She replied, her voice soft but firm. "I heard no one could get close to Max. I thought, maybe that's why I should try." Silence stretched for a moment. Mr. Whitmore narrowed his eyes slightly as if her words had stirred something long buried within him, a distant memory, an emotion frozen in time. He spoke plainly without hiding the truth. He's not safe. I know. And you believe you can help him? No, Maya said after a brief pause. I don't think I can fix him. I just think maybe he doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe he just needs someone who's willing to stay. Once again, silence filled the air. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was like two souls recognizing each other through the silence. Mr. Whitmore asked no more questions. He simply said, "Be here at dawn. You'll have one chance." The next morning, before the sun had crept over the hills, Maya was already standing in the main yard. Her hands trembled slightly from the cold, but her gaze was still and unwavering. She had no plan, no tricks, only a strange and quiet resolve. From afar, Max appeared, massive, his dark coat gleaming faintly under the early sun. A handler led him out with a thick steel leash, fastening it to a sturdy post anchored deep in the earth. Max growled, his muscles taut like a coiled spring, his breathing harsh and aggressive. Maya didn't approach. She stopped at a safe distance, then sat down. No commands, no gestures, no treats. She simply sat, in silence. She didn't meet Max's eyes directly, but neither did she show fear. She let him watch her as if he was the one choosing, and she was the one waiting. Max growled loudly and lunged forward, the chain yanking taut. Some onlookers flinched, but Maya didn't move. The wind blew strands of her hair across her face, but her eyes remained soft and calm. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Max no longer barked. He just stood, panting, staring at the strange girl who refused to run. And then he sat down. No command, no force, just a choice. The entire training yard fell silent. Mr. Whitmore stepped forward, not far from them now. For the first time in many years, his expression showed emotion, astonishment, confusion, then slowly, something that looked like hope. Maya gently reached into her jacket pocket and took out a small, leftover piece of granola. She placed it on the ground and backed away. Max watched. Then he stepped forward. No growl, no snarl. He sniffed the food, then sat beside her. No one spoke. No one could explain what had just happened. But one thing was certain. Max, the dog deemed impossible to save, had chosen to trust the girl the world had overlooked. The moment Max sat beside Maya, the entire training yard seemed to hold its breath. There were no more growls, no more strained chains. Max, the dog once called a monster, now lay quietly, leaning against the frail girl, his eyes still alert, but no longer hostile. Maya didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply reached out and gently stroked Max's back, just once. It was a simple, delicate act, but it felt like a silent promise. Then she slowly stood, brushed the dust from her clothes, and turned to face Mr. Whitmore, who was walking toward her quietly, but with unmistakable emotion in his eyes. "You've done what no adult could," he said, his voice low but clear. "You've won. The $1 million is yours." People nearby whispered to one another. Some were in disbelief, others nodded in quiet awe. But all eyes turned toward the girl, not with pity, but with respect. Maya stayed silent for a moment. Then she turned to glance at Max, who now lay on his side, resting his head on his front paws, breathing calmly. She bent down, gently rubbed his ear, and then looked up and said, "I don't want the money." The air shifted. Some thought perhaps she didn't understand what she had just refused. But Maya continued, her voice steady, unwavering. "I just want a room, a place where I won't be kicked out in the middle of the night, 2 meals a day, and to go to school. That's all." It was a request so simple, it hurt. There was no self-pity in her words, only the quiet conviction that she deserved to live like a human being. Mr. Whitmore didn't answer immediately. He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to grasp something greater than the situation itself. Then, after a moment of silence, he nodded slightly and spoke, his voice deeper, softer. "You'll stay in the main house. There's a room upstairs. Tomorrow morning we'll get you enrolled in school." Maya didn't cry, but in that moment, her narrow shoulders dropped just a little, as if an invisible burden she had carried for years had finally been set down. She gave one small nod, firm and certain. "Thank you." Mr. Whitmore stepped closer and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture, not grand or dramatic, but filled with years of unspoken emotion. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured, "not just for Max, for me too." That night, for the first time in her life, Maya slept in a real bed. No more cold pavement, no more honking cars or whistling wind down alleyways. The mattress hugged her back, the pillow smelled of lavender, and the blanket wrapped around her like a quiet embrace. Her room was small, a window, a study desk with a lamp, an empty wardrobe, a vase of dried flowers on the windowsill. But to Maya, it was a palace. Just outside her door, Max lay curled up, ears twitching at every sound, not as a guard dog on duty, but as a protector who knew it was his turn to watch over someone who had once waited for him. No chains, just trust. In the room next door, Mr. Whitmore sat on the edge of his bed, holding the old photo. Me and Duke, 1965. He stared at it for a long time, not with the ache of loss, but with the quiet remembrance of something beautiful he thought was gone. He whispered softly, "He didn't need to be fixed, because he was never broken. You reminded me of that." The next morning, Maya awoke to golden sunlight streaming through her window. She walked downstairs beside Mr. Whitmore, step by step, as if she had always belonged there. Max followed behind, not leashed, not commanded, just walking, faithfully, like a shadow that had finally found its light. No one questioned it. No one needed to. Because everyone could feel it, the world had changed, simply because one person had the patience to stay and the courage to believe. From that day on, everything at the Whitmore estate began to change. Not suddenly, not loudly, but gradually, like new grass sprouting after a long rain. Maya was no longer the nameless girl who slept by the iron gate. She became Maya of the Whitmore estate, the girl who had done what no one else could, earned the trust of the untamable dog. Every morning, Maya woke up on time, neatly folded her blanket, put on a simple school uniform, and sat down to breakfast with Mr. Whitmore. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them no longer felt strange. It was the calm of two people who no longer had to be alone. Mr. Whitmore still read the newspaper and drank his black coffee, but now he had a new routine, packing a small lunch bag labeled Maya in blue ink. Max followed her all the way to the gate each morning, standing quietly to watch her go, his tail swaying gently, not out of caution, but with peaceful joy. In the afternoon, he would return to the same spot, like a loyal clock, waiting. When Maya came back, he gave a soft bark, not as a warning, but as a welcome home. Maya was enrolled at a nearby public school. She had never been to class before, so those first lessons felt like doors opening to a world she had only glimpsed through a bus window. Though sometimes confused, she studied hard. She loved books, the laughter of her classmates, and the old wooden desk with her name on it for the very first time. Word of the girl who tamed Max spread throughout the town. At first, it was just whispers among the estate staff. Then it reached diners, gas stations, and classrooms. People retold the story with surprise and admiration. And when they heard how Maya had turned down $1 million, asking only for a home and a chance to go to school, they fell silent. Because everyone understood some things can't be bought, like trust, patience, and the opportunity to be human. Mr. Whitmore, once a closed-off old man, began to shed the shell of his solitude. He was no longer just the reclusive billionaire with vicious dogs, but the old man who lives with a girl and her special dog. When someone asked why he had agreed to take Maya in, he simply said, "Because she reminded me, not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need someone willing to stay." On the first winter nights in her new room, Maya no longer curled up from the cold. She lay beneath a warm blanket, eyes tracing the ceiling, listening to the steady breathing of Max outside her door. On some nights, she would quietly open it, sit on the floor beside him, gently stroke his warm back, and whisper, "You're just like me, aren't you? Left behind by the world." But all we really needed was one person who stayed. Max never answered in words, but the way he pressed against her, breathing softly, tail tapping gently on the floor. That was the only answer she needed. One evening, in the soft yellow glow of the hallway light, Mr. Whitmore stood silently, watching Maya from a distance. In his hand was the old photo. Me and Duke, 1965. For the first time, he didn't look at it with grief. He smiled, a small smile, but a true one. Then he turned, placed the photo back on the shelf, and let the memory rest. Maya's story wasn't a miracle. It didn't begin with fireworks, nor end with applause, but it stood as proof that just a little faith, a little perseverance, is enough to change an entire life. Maya didn't need a miracle. She just needed to be seen, to be believed in, to be chosen. And Max, the dog once labeled beyond saving, didn't need fixing. He just needed someone who wouldn't walk away. As for Mr. Whitmore, the man who thought he had lost everything, he finally understood. Sometimes saving someone else is the only way to save yourself. Life doesn't always require grand gestures to create change. Sometimes all it takes is one person, patient enough to sit beside a wounded soul, gentle enough to demand nothing, and strong enough to simply stay. Maya didn't come to tame Max. She came to listen, to be present, to show that love doesn't need a reason or conditions. And Mr. Whitmore, who once lived in the darkness of memory, found his light again, not through wealth or past glories, but through a girl the world had forgotten. In the quiet bond between a lonely old man, a wild-hearted dog, and a homeless girl, they found each other. And in doing so, they found themselves. Because sometimes what we need most in life isn't to be saved, but to be believed in, to be allowed to stay.